My name is Maat. Just relocated from Florida to Virginia. In Florida, I ran for Congress as a Libertarian, so those of you who are running for office, I know the pain that you're going through. Good luck with that. I just retired from my second career as a police officer in Florida. I worked for a town in South Broward County in the rough and tumble for the past 12 years. Before that, I was a professional economist for about 20 years, worked for the federal government and some agencies, international agencies, for the White House for a couple years. Had my own business educating bankers for a long time. Worked as a free market advocate in Washington for quite a while, launching a campaign for the presidential nomination. So I'm really happy to be here. Do what it is that motivates you and that you feel like you'd be good at and you're comfortable with. You know, for those of you who haven't, you ought to see Clint's podcast because it's really good. You know, he's good at this sort of thing. He's the right guy to be doing it, and was motivated, obviously, by what was going on at the time. So it gave him sort of a mental entree into getting worked up about what was going on, public policy-wise, and that motivated him to do something that he was really good at. For me, you know, being an economist in Washington, if you don't bump into something every hour that bothers you, your eyes are not open, right? You're not fully awake. I was there when President Bush said, you know, read my lips, no new taxes, and then like an hour and a half later went back on it. I'll tell you, as a young economist, that leaves an impression on you. That's someday long ago I was a young economist. That really leaves an impression on you. And if you're not an economist already, when you become a police officer, you become one real quick. You get motivated by the effects that you see of bad public policy on people and neighborhoods that you really care about. And for me, it was that motivation that, you know, got me involved with running for Congress. But to Mike's point, whatever it is that motivates you and whatever is your comfort niche, go for it, because there are 100,000 ways to do this, and we got to do them all as a team. Living your best libertarian self and just being true to your values and honest with how you feel about things and being honest with your family and friends and letting people know that it's okay to feel the way you do and to stand up for your principles. I mean, you don't have to be a jerk about it the way I do with my family, but you know, there's nothing wrong with questioning the duopoly, right? And, you know, be kind to your Democratic and Republican friends. They may be way deep down inside, under several onion layers, more libertarian than we think. To a certain extent, they are inside cults, right? And you need to save them intellectually, if not, you know, officially and legally. Let them know that it's okay for them to think about the Constitution and even be anarchists, although that might be going to one train stop too far for most of our Republican and Democratic friends. But let them know that, you know, it's okay to think about the Constitution and live up to the principles for which they profess, even if they don't act on them. Someone had argued that the federal government would be the worst agency to represent us through the green movement. I think that there's other good candidates, including the UN. I think the EU. There are organizations out there that are just every bit as illiberal, anti-competition, anti-capitalism, anti-economic, anti-human as the federal government is. That's not to say our federal government is any good, but there are other candidates to take that trophy. And I worry about that in the context of this. While I may not be quite as convinced that it's an imminent and immediate threat, the truth is that change is downstream of a cultural awakening. We do not want to lead this with public policy. You should no more want a Democratic or Republican president to lead the world toward greenness as you would want them to lead a military intervention in Iraq. It's you know, they're just as incompetent as that sort of thing. So, you know, Clint is right. We need the market forces to lead these changes, and we need, for those of you who believe, as I assume that you do, that there is an existential threat out there, we need for those cultural forces to bear down on the capitalistic markets that we have to make these changes. Now remember that the problem is not inside the United States. The problem is in places like India and China, whereas the greatest ground can be made up, right? So no amount of electing Joe Biden or Donald Trump is going to matter one way or another there. They're just going to bring more problems to us and not much solution elsewhere. So what you really want to do is work hard at opening up those economies to cultural forces from around the world. Good luck with that.
I just want for you to real quick sum up what anybody in the room can do to help you do what you're doing. But before you expect them to do it, let us know what your most anti-libertarian view is, or your biggest status view.
Biggest status view? All right, I'll go with the cop thing. My biggest status view is that we will probably always have some form of police. By always, I mean, I'm going to go for the rest of the century, we're going to have some form of police. Now, for those of you who don't know me well, I spend an enormous amount of time talking about law enforcement reform. I'm a big believer that we need to fundamentally change the way that we manage cops in this country. And on any number of levels, all the way down to the very detailed, granular level of how we train cops. We have to change a lot. We have to change the relationship between unions and municipalities, and that means instituting private sector liability insurance and ending court deference to police officers these days. And it's not just a matter of qualified immunity, it goes a lot farther than that. So I'm big on reform, but I recognize, and yeah, I heard a few yoo-hoos in the audience, so maybe we need to argue about it a little bit, but I recognize that we're probably going to be burdened with some form of criminal justice system in this country for the remainder of the century. It is my view that we have, and I will brook no argument at this point, we have the world's most oppressive criminal justice system. And it is a heartbreaker for anyone who wants to ride in a car with me for a couple of shifts. You will see that we are very efficient at destroying people's lives. And it's not because all of our politicians are evil, it's mostly because they're idiots. It's the nicest thing I can say about it. So the two things that you can do, I'm running for president, so if you want to go on my website and learn something, that's great. But learn a little bit about your criminal justice system and be open to the idea. For those of you who are rah-rah, cop, and I know that in our party we don't have too many of those people. Keep your mind open to the deep reforms that we need to make and how it affects people that are not in this room. It can't be about us. It has to be about families that are really under the thumb, that have to experience persistent intergenerational poverty, and for not just years and decades, but for generations. It's a real problem. So good luck with that.
More vocally saying that those citizens are the problem, not the police officers. But the citizens go to the politician, who have the laws passed to cause the problem.
Yeah, that was a little bit longer than I thought, but yeah.
It's okay, I'll make up for it with a long answer. If I can speak just 25 feet away from you and use the microphone at the same time, I agree wholeheartedly, especially with where your heart is. Let me play on that just for a moment with a view that is simpatico with yours, but maybe coming at it from a different angle. I believe that a lot of our policy in the United States and around the world, whether it's related to criminal justice or not, is driven by fear. And if we look just back over the last couple of years, I think you would have to agree that a lot of our stupid pandemic policies were driven by fear, and politicians' ability to manipulate our fear in order to gain authority and power to themselves. And I think you see that in the criminal justice system in a big way. Consider that most voters, whether you're black or white, most voters do not anticipate being on the wrong side of the law. So a lot of them are wrong about that, but it's a very easy thing to push, to your point, it's an easy thing to push politicians to crack down on what they perceive to be as threats. And politicians are more than happy to stoke fear, to position themselves as the way to allay your fears, right? I'm gonna be the solution to your problem by passing a 1996 crime bill, or going back farther than that. You won't remember, but I do remember Richard Nixon and the policies that he brought in to represent the silent majority, which meant a little bit of racism, but a whole lot of oppression of an underclass. And I believe that the set of policies that were brought in the 60s and 70s laid the groundwork for the persistent intergenerational poverty that we see to this day. And when you layer that on top of slavery and Jim Crow, you get a lot of racism mixed into it. But our policies are sometimes racist per se, and sometimes racist because we're idiots and we put our thumb down on the impoverished.